With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the AgNet News Hour. Coming up later, how agricultural groups are helping to bring a bond measure to the November ballot. We'll have more on that, but our top story today. The House Agriculture Committee met this week for a hearing to examine the consequences of EPA's action on American agriculture. In his opening statement, Committee Chair Glenn G.T. Thompson pointed out the environmental stewardship of farmers.
American farmers and ranchers are the original conservationists. No one cares more for the environment than those whose livelihoods depend on it. They work tirelessly to ensure consumers have the safest, most abundant, most affordable food and fiber supply in the world. Agriculture is unlike any other industry where producers are at the mercy of many uncontrollable factors, including extreme weather, natural disasters, pests and diseases, input costs, and geopolitical unrest. What producers should not have to worry about is the federal government working against them.
He also pointed out recent actions that pit the EPA against agriculture.
Last summer, the EPA published the draft Vulnerable Species Pilot Program and the draft Herbicide Strategy that will directly impact the ability of producers to utilize these critical tools and will cost billions to comply with. Even this administration's own U.S. Department of Agriculture expressed significant concerns with these actions. The Biden administration's attacks on American agriculture do not stop at crop protection tools. Earlier this year, the EPA published a proposed rule that significantly changes the effluent limitations guidelines for meat and poultry processing. While Biden's USDA spends millions to supposedly expand meat and poultry processing capacity, his EPA is simultaneously proposing rules that would shutter processing plants and impose significant compliance costs across industries vital to food affordability.
Conversely, Ranking Member David Scott used his opening statement to express disappointment in the lack of a farm bill.
I must express my deep concerns about Chairman Thompson's willingness to forego the farm bill. His stubborn refusal to engage on a bipartisan farm bill is irresponsible for the American people, especially our farmers who feed, fuel, clothe, and house our nation. Since our very divisive markup almost 2 months ago, there has been absolutely no progress on Chairman Thompson's bipartisan bill. This delay hurts the American people.
At this time, no action is scheduled for the bill. Despite some areas of excessive dryness, improvements are found in USDA's latest topsoil moisture condition report. Rod Bain has more.
Topsoil moisture conditions nationwide note a slight week-over-week improvement. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says for the period ending July 7th,
we see exactly 1/4 of the United States reporting short to very short topsoil moisture. That is down 3 percentage points from last week's 28%. Surplus topsoil moisture unchanged week over week, and the current number is 12% surplus.
Pockets of excessive wetness are found in the upper Midwest.
Both Minnesota and Wisconsin coming in this week with 51% surplus.
While topsoil moisture shortage remains a concern in several Atlantic coast states, despite recent rains.
Anywhere from 59 to as high as 90%, very short to short, from Georgia all the way northward to Maryland and Delaware.
Expanding topsoil moisture shortage is also reported in parts of the South pre-Hurricane Beryl and several western states. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
The American Farm Bureau Federation is launching a brand new award. Chad Smith reports on the effort to elevate and celebrate those who have served our country.
The American Farm Bureau Federation is seeking applicants for the new Veteran Farmer Award of Excellence, sponsored by Farm Credit. Logan Yearsley, Director of Member Engagement for Farm Bureau, talks about why the organization established this award.
We are wanting to elevate and celebrate those who have served our country and continue to do so through involvement in agriculture and community, really thanking those who served our country and continue to serve agriculture.
Yearsley says the applications will be reviewed based on excellence in farming and community impact.
There's two main areas for the Veteran Farmer Award of American Farm Bureau that we're really looking for, and that is involvement in agriculture. So in some way, they have been working in an agricultural-related enterprise, business, farm, ranch, something related to agriculture, and that they have been involved and an attribute to their local community.
He says the winner will receive a monetary award sponsored by Farm Credit, along with travel expenses to attend AFBF's upcoming convention.
So we are excited to announce that the recipient of this year's Veteran Farmer Award of Excellence will receive a $10,000 recognition and a up to $5,000 reimbursement for them and a guest to attend the 2025 Convention for American Farm Bureau in San Antonio, Texas.
Applicants are not required to be Farm Bureau members and may apply themselves or be nominated. Applications are due by August 30th. Learn more at fb.org/veteran farmer. Chad Smith, Washington.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. In today's National Spotlight, new tech is always featured at the Farm Progress Show, and this year is no exception. David Geiger has this report.
In just about 50 days or so, the Farm Progress Show will be rolling out exhibits in Iowa. Show manager Matt Youngman says there is a great crop sitting at the Boone grounds.
Just saw some pictures texted in, and that corn's all tasseled and starting to brown silk, and it was all in the ground by April 12th with the help of the host farmers and John Deere coming in there and getting that all planted. We are in as good a shape as we could hope for field demonstrations at the end of August.
Youngman says there's plenty of new stuff on the roster.
Our friends at Van Wall are going to have a big $30 million plus auction. We're going to have a brand new exhibitor with an air tractor there. Lots and lots of ride and drives. It's going to be a really interactive show with a lot of opportunity for folks to get behind the wheel of a lot of different things.
Going back to air tractor in that lineup, the yellow airplanes that spray the crops, Youngman says they had to think a bit outside the box on logistics.
It's going to come from the factory in Texas and land in the parking lot there at the show site a couple weeks before the show, and Rick and the team there are going to blow a hole in the fence and bring it in and then patch the fence back together and have it on display there at the show. It takes 3 full lots to display it, so it's going to be a pretty cool thing to get up close and personal with something that a lot of folks don't have an opportunity to lay their hands on.
And as for other new tech at the site,
Case IH has their 260 series combine, all the stuff that you saw unveiled at Commodity Classic, from John Deere, that big unveiling, all that will be out in the field running. Something else new from John Deere that I can't talk about is coming. So yeah, lots and lots of new stuff.
The Farm Progress Show in Boone this year, August 27th through the 29th. It's $25 at the gate, but $15 if bought in advance at farmprogressshow.com. I'm David Geiger reporting.
2026 includes a United Nations-sponsored International Year of Celebration focusing on women ag producers across the globe. It's an event led by the U.S. and its Agriculture Department. Rod Bain reports.
An effort years in the making.
Started many years ago, and I actually got to work on it myself when I was at USDA with great leaders.
Is now wrapping up for an upcoming year-long recognition and celebration.
It's time for more work. The work that will go into making sure that 2026, throughout this year, people all over the world will recognize the impact of women farmers.
Former Agriculture Deputy Secretary Krista Hardin and the current Deputy Secretary Xochitl Torres Small, respectively, at a recent kickoff event at USDA headquarters for International Year of the Woman Farmer event planning. The United Nations resolution was approved in May. This is U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield.
Of all the women in the world, in the global labor force, 2/5 work in agri-food systems. In many regions, that number is even higher, with more than 2 in 3 women in the labor force working in agri-food systems in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Asia.
The UN resolution, led by our nation and USDA, was co-sponsored by 123 member countries. The International Year of the Woman Farmer resolution is also historic in this context. This is the first ever U.S.-led international year of effort within the United Nations in that organization's almost 80-year history. Former Deputy Secretary Hardin admits being asked by global counterparts why our nation chose to take the lead with this recognition.
I can only smile and laugh and just say never, never underestimate the power and the passion of women in agriculture in the U.S.
The efforts within the Agriculture Department and the U.S. itself to promote this global celebration have had one constant in leadership throughout, as acknowledged from former Deputy Secretary Hardin and Deputy Secretary Torres Small. Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs, Alexis Taylor.
So many people have invested their time and energy to get to this point. Many partners within the U.S. government, from the State Department to USAID, White House, and the National Security Council, who are co-sponsors of the resolution from every corner of the planet. And so many in the private sector and the NGO community. And this wouldn't be possible without our incredible team of the Foreign Agricultural Service.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
That's today's National Spotlight. Now here's the Livestock Report with Todd Gleason.
The report showed inventories about the same as last month and last year. It's more of the same, really, says Western Illinois University agricultural economist Jason Franken, with productivity gains offsetting farrowing cuts.
Overall, the number of hogs weighing less than 180 pounds is about 1.5% larger than a year ago, which will be the market hogs arriving at processing plants from July through November. The year-over-year increase in lighter weight hogs partly reflects the larger March through May pig crop, which itself results from a continued trend of growth in pigs per litter, here 1.75% higher than a year ago, outpacing reductions to farrowings at just 0.1% lower.
USDA shows the summer and fall farrowing intentions are down about 2.5% and 0.5%, respectively, from actual farrowings last year, which suggests to Franken that hog producers are showing some restraint from expansion. However, he notes that while lower farrowing intentions historically would imply somewhat smaller slaughter numbers in the future, to what degree depends a great deal on the pigs saved per litter or that productivity gain, which has been offsetting the lower farrowing intentions. Now, from the consumer side, the USDA June forecast shows U.S. per capita pork consumption at 50.6 pounds per person per year in 2024, with an expectation this will fall by 0.3 pounds for the calendar year 2025. This, Franken says, reflects continued concerns for consumer purchasing power in the face of inflation, the availability of pork, and, of course, strong export demand. On that note, the U.S. exported 656 million pounds of pork in the month of April, or about 13% more than April of 2023. 38% of that went to Mexico. That's a 30% year-over-year increase, reflecting low bone-in ham prices and the strength of the peso. I'm Todd Gleason.
This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. Coming up in a few moments, we'll have today's This Land of Ours report, but first, more of the day's agriculture news. And with a preview of what you'll hear today on AgNet West, here's Brian German.
California growers are looking to the IR4 project to help with addressing pest management concerns. During the Salinas Biological Summit last month, VP of Environmental Science and Resources at Braga Fresh, Eric Morgan, had the opportunity to meet with other industry members to start working toward collaborative efforts with the IR4 project.
So I was fortunate enough, Western growers that I worked pretty closely with on a number of regards asked me to go to a dinner last night with two representatives with IR4, and IR4 is, I believe, a USDA entity that helps, get registrations of products, and specifically in California it's really challenging with the way CDPR is looking at new products, and even if it's an IR4, where they do that additional research that's necessary. But it's been challenging. We don't have, the synthetic chemistry pipeline into California is essentially closed. CDPR, has a roadmap to sustainable pest management, where I feel that by 2050 all the synthetics that we're using are going to be gone. They want us to use biologicals like we're evaluating here at the Biological Summit. So, we need to get there. We need to figure out how to use these new products as they come in. We need to understand what the expectations, be able to apply them properly. What does the effect on water chemistry have? What is the effect that your soil health of, in the field has on the use of biologicals? But really overarching to that is start to bring, the different agricultural sectors in California together. So I'm able to represent cool season leafy green vegetables pretty well. But that was kind of the only representation of that meeting last night with IR4. But already today, talking to Morningstar about what they might need in the tomato market, and then talk to the agronomist from Ingleby, which is growing pistachios, and really start to bring whatever other markets we have to the table and say, what do you have that is available domestically that you can't use in California? And that's what IR4 does. 49 states, once EPA has finished their evaluation of a new pesticide, it's good to go in those 49 states. You have to get through CDPR in California and overcome, a whole other host of obstacles, and that has been a roadblock. So even if we're unable to be successful bringing in chemistries that EPA has approved for domestic use into California, we need to start to build a track record of effort to, bring in solutions that we need to be able to continue to feed the world.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture announced $12 million in grants for the Dairy Business Innovation Initiatives. The funding will be used to support dairy processing capacity, on-farm improvements, and technical assistance. The grants will be given to California State University Fresno, the University of Tennessee, Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and the University of Wisconsin. These initiatives provide technical help and subawards to small and mid-sized dairy businesses, helping them diversify markets, improve income, and develop higher-value milk products. Since 2019, the initiatives have invested over $64 million and supported over 600 dairy businesses in 40 states. Interested dairy farmers and businesses should contact their regional initiative for assistance. Applications must be submitted by August 27th and are encouraged to include goals related to climate resilience and support for underserved communities. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is providing additional support through the Emergency Assistance for Livestock Honeybees and Farm-Raised Fish Program. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack explains the reason for adding dairy cattle infected with H5N1 as being eligible for the program.
A confirmed H5N1 positive test result, that is to say confirmed through USDA's APHIS National Veterinary Services Laboratory, is required to be eligible for this recovery assistance. Now, this is going to build on the efforts that we've made to ensure that we're limiting the spread of the virus as it's detected. While dairy cows have been impacted and affected, generally recover after a few weeks, and there's little mortality associated with this disease, it does dramatically limit milk production for a period of time, which obviously causes economic loss for producers with affected premises. And for that reason, we've chosen to support farmers with the ELAP program to offset those losses.
Western United Dairies and the Almond Alliance have helped to secure the passage of the legislation placing a new bond measure on the ballot in November. The legislature passed SB 867, known as the Safe Drinking Water, Wildfire Prevention, Drought Preparedness, and Clean Air Bond Act of 2024, which will be voted on in the November general election. If approved, it will provide $10 billion for projects to improve water and wildfire resilience, protect biodiversity, and support sustainable farming. Significant funds would be allocated for enhancing sustainable agriculture and water management practices. The Department of Water Resources will receive more than $386 million for groundwater projects and initiatives like LandFlex, which focuses on flood control and groundwater recharge. The Almond Alliance and Western United Dairies will continue supporting the bond measure and are committed to working with state leaders to ensure its approval and implementation. The California Dairy Innovation Center has released the schedule for summer and fall courses as part of its 2024 training program series for processors, producers, entrepreneurs, and students. The courses, which have no prerequisites, will be held at a variety of California locations and are open to all participants. The Advanced Cheese Making course will take place July 16th and 17th in collaboration with Cal Poly at the Dairy Products Technology Center in San Luis Obispo. The second annual Innovation Conference and State of the Industry will take place September 12th in collaboration with the Pacific Coast Coalition at Fresno State University. The Hispanic and Mediterranean Cheese course will take place October 8th and 9th in collaboration with Cal Poly San Luis Obispo at the Dairy Products Technology Center. More information about the courses is available at cdic.net/events. I'm Brian German for AgNet West Radio Network.
An agriculture teacher in Florida gets a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That's coming up on This Land of Ours. When the Blue Angels take to the sky over Pensacola, Florida this week, they'll have a special guest on board. Austin Corson, an agriculture education teacher, FFA advisor, and incoming assistant principal. Every year, the Blue Angels select a key influence writer for their work in the community. Corson was selected to fly with them due to his steadfast commitment to his students, specifically grounded in agricultural courses and the FFA. Under his leadership, the Tate FFA chapter earned its place among the top-performing 160 chapters out of 9,500 chapters nationwide. Corson teaches the Unmanned Aircraft in Agriculture course at Tate High School, which came about because of a funding grant from the state of Florida to teach highly specialized agricultural use of the unmanned aircraft systems. The course is designed to successfully link agriculture and aviation. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. Let's talk about LEP. What are the key benefits of your products for farmers in the Western Zone?
So Live Earth Products, we mine and manufacture a ingredient called humate. Now, humate is rich in organic acids called humic acid and fulvic acid. Now, those are common components in your soil organic matter. And here in the Western United States, unlike, those places around the Mississippi going east, actually have very low organic matter. Now, your organic matter is key think of it as the pantry in the soil. So it's key to water retention, nutrient retention, nutrient cycling, microbial activity, those kind of things. So anything that's going to impact the increase in soil organic matter will also impact things like water holding capacity and nutrient holding capacity, which is a big deal here in the West when water is not as abundant as it is in the east side of the United States.
Now, what about nitrate? I know nitrate can be a problem in some soils. So how do LEP products help reduce the nitrate problem on saturated soils?
So Live Earth Products is not unique in how we affect nitrogen, but any organic matter will help retain nitrogen. So typically, the mechanisms that we use are blending the nitrogen with the humate. So what happens is the nitrogen will attach to the humic acid, and you will see less of the processes that degrade or volatilize nitrogen. So nitrogen will either convert to a gas or it'll be converted by microbes into a nitrate and leach to the soil. So the longer you have that product is not being volatilized or converted, the longer opportunity for that nutrient to be used by the plant. We have university testing that has shown that when you blend these organic acids with the nutrient, you give that plant a longer opportunity to use that nutrient before it's lost, volatilized, or converted.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Questions and answers. They've been the cornerstone of many popular quiz shows. And of course, one of the most famous started back in the late 40s.
You Bet Your Life, starring the one and only Groucho Marx.
Here's the question for $30. What is the name of the second president of the United States?
The second president?
Yes, and I'll give you a hint. His first name was George.
George Washington.
I'm sorry, it's John Adams.
But you told her the first name was George.
I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Of course, Groucho's job was to ask the questions, which usually were nonsense, but there are some folks whose job every day is to answer questions, serious questions, some of which do turn out to be nonsense nonetheless.
It runs the gamut as far as what kind of questions I get. It's really fun.
That's Kansas State University Extension food scientist Karen Blakesley. Her job is to answer questions from folks all over her state, and over the years, she's been asked some pretty interesting ones dealing with everything from food safety to cooking questions to food preservation. And she's had to deal with quite a few kind of oddball questions. For example...
This one's kind of disgusting, but...
These guys have been out hunting and... had shot a wild turkey one day and left it out and hadn't decided to dress it or cook it until the next day, and they wanted to know if it was still okay.
Which can be a food safety issue on that, and who knows what could grow at those temperatures in there. So that one I told them they better not eat their turkey.
And along the same track,
somebody wanted to know how to cook crow meat.
Karen had to do a bit of research on that one.
I found some recipes where they use, it's the breast of the crow that can be used. I'd rather see them use chicken instead.
And now on to the vegetable question. Here's one I've always wondered about. Yeah, right.
Are there male and female green peppers? This person found a recipe that specifically called for female green peppers. And according to our horticulturists, there's no difference. They're all in one.
Ooh, kinky. Well, next, a combination bread and medical question. Now, since yeast is used in bread...
Will not eating bread clear up yeast infections?
Oh, my goodness.
No, it's two different yeasts there. That's totally two different species. So it's best they go see a doctor on that one.
Yeah, I think so. We don't want to give the impression, though, that Karen Blakesley only deals with quirky questions. She has to answer some serious food safety questions that could affect the health of many, many people. But then there are those other questions.
I get some good ones.
I'll bet. What a job. In Washington, Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Applications are now being accepted for a USDA offering to assist local organizations, cooperatives, and tribes expand affordable high-speed internet in their service areas.
Our broadband technical assistance program applications will be accepted through August the 20th. Applications will be accepted via grants.gov.
Rural Development Undersecretary Basil Gooden says $25 million in funding is available through this second round of awards. The initial application process last year made $20 million available. Yet, as the Undersecretary explains,
that program was certainly oversubscribed. We got 96 applications requesting about $44.5 million.
This round of funding includes 2 application categories.
Yeah, technical assistance providers. And in that category, we have up to $15 million that's made available to entities that are looking to provide technical assistance to organizations or communities or entities looking to expand high-speed internet available for their localities. We also have technical assistance recipient category, and we have $10 million available to that category. Those are entities that are actually looking to receive technical assistance as well.
In addition, an enhanced scoring criteria will be used in evaluation of applications for this round of funding.
Points will be added to your application if you're either an application from or if it's serving a distressed community, really focusing on advancing racial justice, place-based equity, and opportunity. But then also, too, points will be added if your application is either from or it's going to serve a Rural Partners Network community.
The Undersecretary notes this is but the latest effort within rural development to expand high-speed internet access to rural America.
USDA Rural Development has been a key player in broadband expansion, certainly through our Reconnect program.
Part of the overall focus of
USDA Rural Development to make sure that rural America has the same opportunities, the same access to the technology and high-speed internet as any other place in the country.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This is the AgNet News Hour. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. As we mentioned earlier in the show, the House Agriculture Committee met this week for a hearing to examine the consequences of EPA's action on American agriculture. California Congressman Jim Costa is on the Ag Committee and was at the hearing. He had several questions for witnesses. Here are his thoughts.
I was speaking to a group of farm leaders earlier today, and I represent one of the larger agricultural areas, not only in California, but therefore in the country. I think that farmers, ranchers, dairymen, and women are critical in so many different ways, but they're also stewards of the environment. I think many of us feel that way. The challenges of coming together with local, state, and federal policy to ensure that agriculture remains what it is, which is a national security issue. It's an international security issue. And with 4% of the nation's population directly involved, we don't often think of it in that way, but it is. And so what I would like to do is ask a few questions related to our witnesses. Obviously, climate change and other factors are impacting our producers throughout the country. Mr. Kepley, in your earlier, it's Kipley, right?
Yes.
You talked about WOTUS and the challenges of the ping pong, as you described it. I would call it a political football, but where do you think we ultimately find the common sense solution so that we avoid the ping-ponging effect that you described?
You know, I think it's going to take scientific, we got to trust the science, we got to work together at all levels. Like my colleague to the left here said, the state needs to be involved in this process. We need farmer input, and we need to come up with a common sense solution. And I think that's where we're going to ultimately land. Unfortunately, the hardest part about the WOTUS has been the back and forth that we've experienced over the last number of administrations. We go from one extreme to the other, it seems like, and we don't really land anywhere in the middle. And I think that's where it's going to have to be, get all the parties together and come up with a good plan. That
put them in a room and apply common sense and don't let them leave until we've gotten there, huh?
Yeah.
Dr. Larson, in your testimony, you talked about the importance of avoiding the patchwork of regulations. In California, we've had some of the strictest pesticide regulations and herbicide regulations in the country. We've tried in the past to create an effective harmonization between our efforts at the state and federal level. Could you further explain the critical importance on how we try to avoid that patchwork and try to, I know one size doesn't fit all clearly, but and certain states take different directions, but could you comment?
Thank you, Congressman. I've lived that firsthand in Boulder County, Colorado. The county owns a lot of public open space that's used for agricultural production. So several years ago, they took it upon themselves, the county commissioners, to ban the use of GMOs, primarily because of their reliance on glyphosate, and ban the use of neonicotinoids based off of some activist promises that there'd be a better way to farm. And so that really put a shock to the system. They spent millions of dollars in taxpayer dollars trying to find a different method that would make it work, and then all of a sudden pivoted towards focusing on soil health and recognizing that some of these pesticides and technologies from a breeding perspective were important for that. My city, in which I live in, has given up using pesticides for controlling weeds and replaced it with 200 goats. That's not been really effective at managing the weeds along the waterways. And what they don't understand is that the weeds don't respect boundaries. So even though there are ag exemptions where people can use pesticides on their own privately owned ground, all of the riverbanks along the bike trails are overridden by kochia. That seed drops into the waterways, it goes into the irrigation canals, and it goes into the farms.
My time is ending here, but I think common sense and trying to get a concurrence on best science is always the challenge when you're trying to harmonize regulations and maintaining food safety and worker safety clearly are the goals. More to be said, but not enough time. Mr. Cooper, your description of your rendering operations and process sounds similar to some of the things we're dealing with in California. Do you use a rendering operation?
Yes, we do. We've had a long-term relationship with Windsor & Sons, which is a local renderer, and it's, I would call it a symbiotic.
What percentage of the waste would you guess are able to be recycled? I mean, give me a ballpark.
Through our live turkey harvesting plant, I think it's about 15 to 20% runs through them, and then they render it, and then we purchase some of that back from them. And so it's been a great relationship, and we would have a really tough time if we didn't have that renderer right next to us, which are literally about 45 minutes away. So
yeah, we've done some similar things.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work. Mr. Chairman, my time's expired, but obviously more work needs to be done.
We continue with comments from Congressman Austin Scott of Georgia.
Ms. Larson, I'm going to come back to you in a second, but I do want to thank you for making the statement that you made. I mean, farmers don't just wake up in the morning and decide that they want to spray a pesticide or a herbicide and spend the money on those chemicals or on the diesel that it takes to spray them unless it's going to lead to crop yield increases, which are necessary for our food supply in this country. And I think that gets lost sometimes in the discussion when you're dealing with activist environmentalists. They think that the farmer just wakes up in the morning and wants to go spend money on diesel and wants to go spend money on chemicals, and it's just false. If it's not going to lead to higher yields for our farmers, then they're not going to go waste the money. They don't have the money to waste. And you made a statement similar to that, and I appreciate you stating that. And these liberal activists, I personally believe, are funded by the Chinese Communist government, who's been very smart in the way they have dipped into the seed supply and the chemical supply that it takes to grow the crops that we all depend on for our food supply. With that said, Director Chin, many specialty crop growers in my district rely on a variety of crop protection tools to protect their fruits and vegetables from damaging pests and diseases. The use of many of these tools is possible through the work of the IR4 project, which develops the data needed to add additional uses to labels and establish tolerances. Can you talk about the importance of registering additional tools for specialty crops and other minor uses?
Sure. We share your concern. We need to make sure that we have tools in the toolbox that fit every size farmer, whether they're a specialty farmer or a large farmer. We need to make sure that there is the ability to change a label when necessary to meet the needs that, say, a specialty farmer is experiencing at that time. We also need to make sure that the burdensome regulations that are coming down from the government are not so burdensome that they force farmers to stop using practices that are good for the environment and protecting their family operation.
Let me say this, because I know you're at the state. I've served for 14 years in the state legislature in Georgia, and I served under multiple governors, both Democrat and Republican. And I found that whether I had a Democrat or Republican administration at the state level, the people that were operating the state agencies were fact-based decision makers that were solution-oriented and recognized the needs of the citizens. I don't feel that same way about the people in the federal agencies, and so I appreciate you and the role that the states play in making sure that we have the balance. And I think that the states do a much better job of it than bureaucratic overlords in the federal agencies. Dr. Larson, many farmers in my district rely on herbicides like glyphosate. In fact, I'll probably use some this weekend around my house, even though I'm not farming. Dicamba and atrazine, when implementing voluntary incentive-based conservation practices like cover cropping and reduced or no-till that helps sequester carbon in the soil. Can you elaborate on the importance of using herbicides to implement conservation practices and how the reduction of these chemicals is going to hurt conservation?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. This is one of my favorite talking points. For sugar beets, the introduction of glyphosate tolerance has been a quantum leap change for our growers. They're finally able to control the weeds. It increased yields 35%, cut fuel consumption 50%, cut greenhouse gas emissions 40%, and has cut water consumption by 30%. I mean, that's true sustainable intensification.
Good for the environment.
Yeah, if we were to lose that tool, it would be devastating for our growers. It takes decades to sequester carbon in the soil, but it takes minutes to lose it. And so if we lose those tools and have to go back to intensive tillage to maintain weed control, all of that carbon's lost back to the atmosphere.
You answered my next question, which what is the impact on conservation if we lose those chemicals? But you know, most of the farmers that I know want to use a system that's good for the environment. They don't just wake up in the morning. None of the farmers I know wake up in the morning and try to find a way to use more diesel, more chemicals, and I appreciate all of you being here.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. Now for more news. Excessive dryness in some parts of the country is contributing to declining conditions of our nation's pastures and rangelands. That per the latest USDA report. Here's Rod Bain.
Pasture and rangeland conditions as a whole in our nation have declined week over week.
Current good to excellent ratings nationally at 44%. That is down 4 points from last week's 48%. Meanwhile, the very poor to poor ratings, exactly 1/4 of the nation's rangeland and pastures rated very poor to poor. That is up 2 points from the previous week.
USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says increasing excessive dryness in the desert Southwest and southern Atlantic coastal states are behind deteriorating national pasture and rangeland condition ratings.
But outside of those pockets of drought and dry concerns, we do see some really rather lush conditions for this time of the year, early July.
With strong good to excellent pasture and rangeland condition numbers reported for all Midwestern states and some states within dry regions such as the West and South. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
And USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey goes over states with notable pasture and rangeland condition ratings as of the period ending July 7th.
In terms of those lower ratings, the biggest concerns are in the Southwest as well as the Atlantic coast states. We do see numbers ranging from 38 to 57% very poor to poor in the Atlantic coast states from Georgia northward to Virginia, led by North Carolina at 57% very poor to poor. In the Southwest, we see Arizona and New Mexico coming in both at 56% very poor to poor. As you look at the Midwest, every single state coming in with with rangeland and pastures at least 1/2 good to excellent, led by Michigan at 81% and Missouri at 80%. Even with the hot, dry weather in the west, we still see a couple of states, Utah and Idaho, coming in above 70% good to excellent. And then even in the south, we still see some relatively green conditions. Florida's been wet of late, 64% good to excellent. Louisiana coming in, leading that region at 66% good to excellent.
That's today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.